Hey, this is Neil from Heavyocity. We're going to look at the punish knob today with percussion. Not any percussion, though. We're going to take a look at the Armageddon percussion from Damage and the low tight drums from Ensemble Drums. So I'm just going to play the Armageddon percussion first with nothing. This is the punish knob on that channel, but it's bypassed. So now I'm going to click this on and slowly push the punish knob up, and then I'll talk about what we're doing. That's out. Punish is really 5 plugins in one. You've got compression, saturation, transients, EQ, and then a limiter so you don't blow your channel up. But inside of each of these components, you've got 3 different compressors: console, modern, and classic. So all of these have a different characteristic. They're modeled after really amazing high-end gear, and they sound like it. So let's just focus on compression first. So I'm compressing a bit just to kind of get a little punch. I'm using the punish knob, and in the other video you've seen how the punish knob can be tied to these parameters. Let's start off with console, which is like a bus compressor in a big format console. So you can hear I'm compressing a lot versus it being off. Now on. So we might want to make up a little gain. That's bypassed. So without changing any settings, let's go to modern. So that is a completely different character to console. It reacts differently to the input signal on modern. And then if we go to classic, that one sounds maybe a bit warmer to me versus console, which is snappier and punchier. So on console, we've got the ratio, which is 1:1, 2:1, up to 20:1 or so. That's the amount of compression that you're putting on the signal. So if you have a peak that's, say, 10 dB louder and you have it set to 10:1, what's going to come out is 1 dB from the 10 dB. The next thing is attack. So if you have a really fast attack, there's really no time for that drum impact to be heard, really. It's going to just immediately be squashed. So, for instance, if we go all the way down with the attack versus way up, so I like, in this case with drums, to keep it a little lazy, or in other words, not a super fast attack, so the drums can come in, you can hear that snap, and then they start to compress. Similar with the release, if you go super short, it's going to be very reactive in almost a negative way. So you want to find a sweet spot where the release isn't super long, because if it is, it's just going to stay smashed and compressed down like this. It never really has a chance to come back up, as opposed to, or even lower. There is a difference. It's not a huge difference, mainly because this drum groove that I programmed is frenetic and it's constant. There's no breaks in it. But we'll keep it around here, a pretty fast release, pretty slow attack. And then with the sidechain high-pass filter, since there's a lot of low end in these drums, if I pull it all the way, like off, where it's going to compress every signal, it's not that it sounds bad, it's just all that low end is going to make the compressor really react and really compress, and it's not going to sound punchy. So if you can push that up, in this case, I'm sitting at 153, maybe we go even higher, because there's also a lot of low mids in this, you'll hear a difference. they seem to come to life a little bit more when it's higher. And then the mix, you know, you could really smash the drums with a lot of compression. And so you like that sound, but you want to mix some of the uncompressed version in. It's subtle there. So you have the original drums, which are less dynamic, and then you have these compressed drums that have more of a punch, and you can mix and match those two. If we quickly go to modern, it has a completely different input structure, so I may push the threshold up. Still pretty compressed sounding, and my ratio is low. I'm only doing a 1.4 to 1. If we come, say, up to show you, to say 10 to 1, pretty close. It's really flattened, and you can really hear the breathing, which is a cool effect if you're into that sound, but it's not very punchy, and I would prefer to go with a punchy sound so it cuts through the mix. So that's an example. The next section, saturation. Again, this is not just one saturation mode. This is 3 different things. We have a tube saturation rack unit, which is unbelievable sounding. That's my favorite. Then modern and vintage, and these are based on mic pre EQs that we overloaded in stages. They're a little more hairy, a little more nasty. On drums, they may not be the best thing. On guitar, they sound really, really cool. It almost sounds like you're reamping the guitar, or you can take a clean guitar, put it through. So let's go to tube. So no distortion here, and as I push it up, you can hear it breaking up a bit. So you want to be, you use that lightly with a compression. That's what you bypassed. We can go through the other models. This one's modern. A little hairier, it blows up more. Just shaving some of the top end off there. And then the other model is vintage. Now that's clearly destroying that with distortion, which is totally cool if that's the sound you're going for. I'm going to back it off a little bit, but you get a sense of the 3 flavors. All right, and then transients. This is a transient shaper, so the attack is going to push the attack of the drums. You're going to really get a sharper snap to the whole thing. And the sustain is going to do that. It's going to make the releases feel a little longer, almost like you're turning up the room sound on the drums. Then put it in. So this is negative sustain. Just really hear those boom, boom, boom. The accents really just ring longer. And then with the EQ, I'm boosting a good amount of lows. With the Armageddon drums, it's not this crazy sub-harmonic, low stuff going on. So I put some back in by pushing that up, and the top. That's about 8 kilohertz. Pushing the top up for a little gloss, and then the limiter just to keep it from blowing the channel up. So I'm going to put this back in to my original preset. And then if you watch again, bringing the punish knob down, their parameter changes. When it's low, the transient attack is low. When I push it, it pushes it up. Same thing with the sustain. And I've programmed all this. The EQs I left stagnant, and then the same thing with the compression and the drives threshold and the amounts. So those are going to move with the punish knob. All right, so without it, it up. So it's a little thicker. It would cut through the track better for sure. It sounds obviously more compressed, but I think in a good way. You can really hear the room coming up from being quiet to louder and filling out the drums. You could push this further. That's a pretty big difference. All right, so real quick, another set of drums in the Armageddon Percussion, just to hear what it sounds like on other drums. These are higher toms, I believe. And with these, there's less input, there's less low end, so you're seeing the compression, it's not reacting as much. So we may go in and pull that threshold, down to get some more compression. And then maybe push some of these things to be a little more aggressive. And then without it. So pretty big difference there. In the scheme of a track, if I had a big track going on here, this would make a really big difference. On its own, maybe it sounds like it's a little too compressed or a little too punchy, or maybe not, depending on your taste. But in a track, especially if you're doing like a trailer track or a big orchestra hybrid track, this is the kind of thing that you want to use to really punch it through. There's certain things you can do with EQ and compression. What we've done with the punish knob is take the simplistic version that existed in Damage, which is a really cool effect, and it's in, ensemble drums and gravity, and give you so much more creative freedom with it. Really, the punish knob in the instrument compared to this plug-in, there's really no way to compare the two. You turn the knob up and it sounds good. It's using Contact's internal effects in there versus the punish knob where we modeled super high-end gear. Spent a lot of time looking at the compressor, then having that go into saturation and how those combinations work together, and then say you oversaturate and get some distortion, the transient shaper can really pull back into the mix of what you're hearing a real nice snap and sustain, and then polish it off with some EQ and the limiter. And there are these different flavors. Again, vintage, modern, tube, console, modern, classic. There's a lot of stuff that you can really play with here. So I'm going to go to a different library of ours, which is the Master Sessions Ensemble drums, and these are the low tight drums. These we recorded with an enormous amount of low end, which is a pretty amazing feat, but it can be maybe too much. So let's listen without it. So you get the idea. It's a cool sound. They're tight. Let's put in punish, which I've tweaked for these specific drums. I've taken some of the bottom out. Let's hear it. So, it's more present, there's more air in it, it's snappier. You're going to hear that in the mix, in my opinion, a lot more so than without it. So let's take a look at what we're doing here. We'll shut off some of the components, go back to compression. So you're hearing all that bottom end because the EQ is out for the moment. Unbypassed. So we could compress this a bit more. Now we're on classic for this one. Maybe if we go to modern. That's really squished. And then to console. it's almost bringing up that low rumble in the room from the drums. There's just so much low end. So popping in the EQ, that helps a bit. Now that was after I had already adjusted saturation in the Transients. So if we take a listen to the saturation, so what's going on here? If you look at the punish knob, right down here with this low pass filter, when it's all the way up, I'm actually rolling back those high frequencies. So I'm taking a little of the high end off. Sometimes this saturation can add a little bit of unwanted high end. So let's put that back in. Let me just go into edit mode and get rid of that. So that's just distortion. That's vintage. Let's go to 2. And in modern mode, let's go with that and put the compressor back in. And then add our transients in. Wow, that's a big difference. Probably a little too extreme for my liking, so if we go back to this original preset and take a listen. Does really clean it up. Let's push things a little harder. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding of the inner workings of Punish and how it can be used with really low-end punchy drums like what we have with Damage or ensemble drums, and you can clean some of this stuff up so it punches through the mix better. Hopefully this will allow you to use Punish in a way that really augments your mix. Check it out at heavyocity.com. Thanks for watching.